Welcome to Thrive Deeper, the show based on the Thrive Bible reading guides. This is an ongoing conversation about God's Word with Thrive author, Dr. Matthew Jacoby.
Welcome, listeners. It's Stu here, your host of the Thrive Today podcasts. Just before we jump into this episode of Thrive Deeper, we have some very big news. We're excited to launch our crowdfunding campaign to build the Thrive Today app, a one-stop platform for daily inspiration, biblical insight, and transformative teaching. This app will bring together everything you love: Thrive podcasts, the daily Bible reading guides, teaching video series, and a growing library of meaningful resources designed to deepen your faith journey. But we can't do it without you. To make this vision a reality, we need to raise $30,000. The build won't begin until the full amount is raised, and if we don't reach our target by January 31st, 2026, every donation will be refunded in full. So your support is absolutely vital to get this app off the ground. Let's create something that will bless thousands. Will you partner with us? Simply visit our website, thrivetoday.tv, and click the app crowdfunding link at the top. You can then select your level of support. We'll keep you updated on progress as we seek to raise the funds needed by the end of January 2026. Now let's jump into this episode of Thrive Deeper with Pastor Matt. Good morning, Matt.
Morning, Stu.
Thrive Deeper,
Yeah.
our fortnightly Bible study. Goodness, we've got some interesting stuff to talk about today, haven't we?
Yeah, we have. Listeners might groan when we tell them, Stu, break the either good or bad news to them.
Welcome, listeners. It is great to have you with us, and I'm sure it's going to be great.
Yes, that's good. Yeah,
I'm sure it's going to be great news, but probably not until we get to the end and we understand this. But today we're going to continue looking at the book of Exodus, and we're picking up from chapter 21, and we're going to work through the laws that were handed down by God through Moses to the people. And yeah, some of these laws seem a bit kind of, well, first of all,
troubling. They can come across quite troubling.
But also, do we not just skip through this because this is really relevant to us today? And I think that's what we really want to talk a bit about today. So we're going to focus down a little bit just on a few chapters, and we're just going to really talk through these laws.
At some point you have to do this. Look, if you're interested in reading and understanding the Bible, getting over that slight discomfort with this, because actually what we want to point out today is this is actually amazing, what is happening here. And really the goal here today, Stu, is to help listeners to appreciate that something quite revolutionary is happening here in the context of the ancient world. And there's a lot of historical context behind, because these are very practical and they relate to certain situations that pertain in an ancient context, which is thousands of years in a different culture. Very difficult for us to imagine living in that circumstance. So as I've done a fairly deep dive through these laws, I've come out truly amazed, actually, at how amazingly countercultural this actually is. So let me paint the big picture. How about we start there?
Let's do that.
And then we'll work in from the big picture. Now, we've talked a lot about the importance of order. You know, the order-chaos thing is very important in this ancient context, and it's a theme that's adopted in the Bible. So the book of Exodus essentially is about how God takes his people from one human order to his divine order, right? He's leading them into a different order of life. Now, ancient civilizations were obsessed with order, Stu. They were obsessed with order. Yeah. You have to keep the order to stave off the forces of chaos, right? If you lost order, and I'm going to really underscore this is important. If you lost the order of your society, of your civilization, then everything would collapse. And that goes from worshipping the right gods at the right times, and this is an important one, through maintaining the social structure of your civilization, which invariably were caste systems of some kind, right? So this goes for every ancient culture sought to maintain a caste system, right? The very poor, the slaves at the bottom, and the nobility at the top with the king at the very top. Now, kings gave laws, and we have laws like the famous ancient Babylonian law of Hammurabi, for example. They were the lawgivers, but not themselves subject to that law. Now, a unique thing about the biblical law is that everyone is subject to this. In fact, what we're going to see, not only is everyone subject to it, But essentially, and this is the revolutionary thing about this, is that unlike other Near Eastern laws, and in fact, it's not just ancient Near Eastern laws, you can go right into the East, India, and ancient laws in India and China, and even, ancient Greek laws. Even in fact, Plato's ideal republic is still essentially a caste system, right? Maintaining the order, the caste system.
Yes.
Now, that happens everywhere. What happens in the Law of Moses is that it is set up to actually abolish the very order that these other laws are designed to maintain and protect that.
Yes.
Okay. So everyone is subject to the same law. No matter where you sit in society, not only are you protected in the same way, but you are, and this flows out of Genesis, this idea of the common image of God that every person has, and therefore every human being is sacred.
Yeah.
That's not something that ancient peoples believed.
Well, you couldn't believe that because that dismantles the caste system straight away.
Yeah, that's right.
In reality.
So the king could be thought of as, in some sense, created in the image of God, a child of the deity, let's say. But you'd never say that about everyone. Certainly not slaves and certainly not foreigners. But in the biblical law, everyone is recognized as a sacred child of God. And so protecting that dignity and this amazing countercultural equality, essentially. So this is what you're going to get. Now, it's not only just saying both the slave and the king share a common human dignity. Already that is enormously countercultural for the time. But there are laws that are designed to ensure a caste system could never be sustained in ancient Israel.
Yeah.
There are things like at the end of every 6 years, all slaves would have to go free. On the 7th year, all debts would be cancelled. Think of that.
Yeah.
At the 7 times 7 years, all property, right?
Yes.
Now you think about families that accrue more and more property, become richer and richer.
Yeah.
The dynasties.
Just creating the divide.
That's right. That was what creates the divide. At the end of 7 times 7 years, all property would be redistributed. Think about how radical that is. Would be redistributed back to the original share that's projecting forward to when they're in the land. So that and other things are
completely countercultural. Even to us today, of course, as well.
Yeah, that's right.
Because again, we're living in what is a man-made order. In reality, that's where we still are.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So we've had the 10 Commandments. Okay, they are the 10 words.
Yes.
Okay. Now, just before that, Stu, in chapter 18, we looked at the story of Jethro meeting Moses and how Jethro recommended that Moses not judge all the cases on his own by direct revelation, but that he set up a system of judges, basically, kind of system of courts, essentially. Yeah. Now, we have the judges, but we don't have a law by which they are to judge. Because remember, this is now a people that are coming out. They are going to become a nation. They're going to become a holy nation. Now, holy means separate, different, set apart. Okay, so these laws are meant to be completely distinct to anything in the ancient world, but they're also to be intelligible enough. You can't just jump to say what we have today, because they have to be intelligible in their context, right?
Correct.
So, so that's important too. So what they give to the judges, this is really important point, are not laws the way that we have them that cover every possible situations. They're examples, and the word that we've used so far is paradigms. Paradigms that apply. So a judge could face a situation and he would look to the closest general example that is given. That is given in this law of Moses. Yeah. And he would infer from that. Okay. So we've just got to not think that they kind of stand as our
the only
civil
and, correct. Yeah.
Criminal law stands today. Yeah. So
because and also circumstances. I mean, that would be a ridiculous assumption because there's so many things that happen today that they wouldn't even know existed back then that we have to have civil laws for to deal with. So by reverse, there are things that happened back then that don't happen today that they needed civil laws for that we don't. So we just got to remember, I think that's a really good point to remember that.
So we've got to, when you read these laws, it's important to have some sense of the complete difference of the starting point.
Yes.
So they're not living lives like we live lives, right? And remember, the Bible it's a journey. It's a story that unfolds and God reveals his will progressively to his people. He's taking them on a journey from something to something.
Yes.
Now, what the law of Moses is a giant step forward. But as I said, it's still got to be intelligible. You can't take too big a step forward because it just becomes completely non-workable or unintelligible given their starting point. So all of that's going to help us understand these laws. So
there we go.
Let's jump in.
Hope you enjoyed that episode, listeners. No, let's jump in.
I just really think, Stu, I just don't think we should just ignore these laws. You know, we're doing this now to lead people through these laws, to help you to understand. And we'll read the law and I'll make some comments as we go. I just think now is your moment, listener, just to begin to get your head around what's going on.
And I think that's an important comment because I would have to say, if I was honest, when I've read through the Bible in the past and got to this, but you tend to skim through it.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, yeah. You know, and so I think it's good to actually do this because it's not there by mistake.
Yeah.
You know, there's something for us here. So
and sometimes again, you know, often with a bit of distaste because, and as, you know, when you read the very first law, it's like, oh, you know, there's this almost reaction against this. But when you just scratch below the surface, what we're going to see is there's something pretty amazing happening here.
Yeah. Let's jump into it. Exodus chapter 21. And so these are instructions from God. These are the ordinances that you must set before them, being the people of Israel.
Yeah.
And so the first one is when you buy a Hebrew slave, not if or anything, but when you buy a Hebrew slave. So straight away for me.
Well, some versions, my version does have if. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So mine just says when you buy a Hebrew slave, he is to serve for 6 years. Then in the 7th year, he is to leave as a free man without paying anything.
Okay. So straight away, we react to the idea of someone buying a Hebrew slave. You know, we think America in the sort of 18th, 19th century or something like that.
Or we also project God forward into our culture and go, how could God say when you buy a slave?
Yeah.
You know, but we've got to remember this is not where they are.
That's right. Yeah. So again, it's actually not endorsing it's not endorsing this. It's dealing with the inevitability and the situation here is that when someone fell into debt, what inevitably they would do is that they would sell themselves into bond service. So this is what slavery means here. They would sell themselves into bond service, right? This happened everywhere in ancient societies. So a person would fall into debt and to survive, they would have to sell themselves and often their members of their family, the rest of the members of their family, into slavery. And once that happened, you'd never really be able to rise above that. Okay. So you would essentially become part of the bottom rung of society. Now, in ancient civilizations, that bottom rung was important. Right? A lot of ancient civilizations were actually built on that bottom rung.
Yes.
They depended on people, on a slave caste.
To do that work.
Okay. Now, what this is saying is that, okay, yes, there are situations where for whatever reason, people fall below the poverty line and they sell themselves into service, a little bit like the way that Jacob served Laban to essentially buy Rachel for himself. Okay. Yes. And the buy their marriages were always transactional in the ancient world. Again, no, it's hard for us to imagine, but I'm going to spend a little bit longer on the first one just as a good example of this. So it accepts the fact that this happens, people fall into debt. If you owe someone money, it's perfectly just that it needs to be paid back. And the only real way of doing that in an ancient world context is that you would serve that person. As we're going to see, there are all sorts of laws governing how you can be treated in that circumstance.
So essentially your wage is paid back to them because you owe them debt.
Yeah, that's right. Yep. Now, the revolutionary thing about this is that the term of service could not last more than 6 years. So even if you owed them millions of dollars, you'd have to serve a lifetime to
pay that
back. This law is saying no one can be in that situation for more than 6 years. In the 7th year, they're to go free, however large the remaining result. Now, there's significance due in the fact that it starts with this law. And the reason it starts with this law is because, why do you think it starts with a law about slaves?
Because they'd come out of slavery.
They had come out of slavery.
In Egypt, and he wanted to make sure they didn't treat people the way they didn't want to be treated.
That's right. And they had been in slavery for hundreds of years because when people fall into slavery, that's where they stay.
Becomes multi-generation.
So this is abolishing that whole thing. That is, you are no longer slaves.
Yes.
You know, if you fall into this circumstance, if you fall to the bottom and you end up in bond slavery, 6 years and that's it, then you go free. Now, there are other laws, actually, because, of course, the laws extend into Deuteronomy, so occasionally I'll be referring to Deuteronomy as well. But there are other laws forbidding, and this is another really countercultural thing, that you are not allowed to return an escaped slave.
Yes.
So if a slave escaped, you are actually not, whereas in the law of Hammurabi, or in fact in pretty much every other ancient law, there are all sorts of elaborate punishments for escaped slaves and for those who harbour an escaped slave. But in ancient Israel, it was the opposite. I mean, again, hang on. So if you're mistreated in the house and to the point where you want to run away, there are laws protecting you to ensure that you can keep running away.
And so the flip side of that is what really is trying to happen here is God says, treat your slaves well.
Yeah.
So they don't run away.
Exactly.
Because if they do, they probably need to run away.
Yeah.
In a sense.
Yeah, that's right. As we're going to see, there are all sorts of laws protecting the foreigner who comes in amongst you as well.
Yeah.
And the most likely foreigners to be escaping to this people, to ancient Israel, would be slaves from other countries. And so this is really amazing stuff that's going on here.
Yeah. So it goes on to say, so speaking about the slave again, if he arrives alone, he is to leave alone.
Yeah.
Makes sense. If he arrives with a wife, then his wife is also to leave with him. So you can't set him free and keep his wife. If his master gives him a wife and she bears him sons or daughters, the wife and her children belong to her master and the man must leave alone.
Okay. Again, someone will think, this is terrible. But remember, she's also subject to a period of 6 years.
Right.
So what's probably happened here is that she's got her own debt that she needs to be paid. And of course, you need to marry this woman if she's a servant. You need permission from the master. But this is essentially ensuring that she has to keep serving out her debt to the 6 years.
Right. So he can't just marry her at the 5-year mark, essentially, and then she gets to go free.
Yeah, that's right.
Because she won't have.
Yeah, she's got to continue to pay. She's got to continue to pay off her debt. That's just protecting that. So understand. So don't read here. So the belongs means she is bonded to that master to pay off that debt in that sense, right? So it's because remember, it's not perpetual.
Yes.
Not perpetual slavery. There is actually in a later version of this law, the bit about the wife and the children is actually revoked, interestingly, in Deuteronomy 15, verse 12 and 17, and gave identical right of release or option
for a husband and wife.
Yeah, basically. So
verse 5 then says, but if the slave declares, I love my master, my wife, and my children, and I do not want to leave as a free man, his master is to bring him to the judges, and these are the judges that we talked about that Jethro told Moses to set up. He's to bring them to the judges and then bring him to the door or the doorpost. His master must pierce his ear with an awl, and he will serve his master for life.
Yeah, it was often the case in the ancient world that these larger families were like families.
Yes.
And they provided such stable environments for everyone that was part of that. And this is what this is envisaged, because if indeed these laws are followed and the slaves are treated well as part of the family, then this is actually envisaging. It's
almost like an adoption.
You might read that, you might read that and think, oh, gee, that would seem unlikely. No, it's actually not, because often the servants that we read of, for example, in the Bible, are often, they loved their masters and they were part of the family, and in many cases they didn't want to just be sent off, right? I mean, where would they go?
Exactly, right? Start again, slave for someone else probably.
Yeah. So, they wanted to stay. So this is basically allowing the slave the security of essentially belonging to that family for life.
Wow.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the next one. Verse 7 we're up to, listeners. When a man sells his daughter as a slave, she's not to leave as the male slaves do. If she is displeasing to her master, who chose her for himself, then he must let her be redeemed. He has no right to sell her to foreigners because he has acted treacherously toward her.
Okay. The word here in the Hebrew is the word amah, which is not the same as the word for slave that's used previously, which is ebed. And this is referring to unusual, not unusual, but actually fairly common situations where someone would be betrothed as a concubine. Now,
yes.
I know this is difficult for us to imagine, but we've got to imagine warring societies where a lot of men are getting killed.
Yes.
And so it was quite common for households to be made up of just your immediate family, but servants.
Yes,
and
then concubines.
Often wives and even concubines as well. Again, it's not ideal because as we move on, the idea of one man joined to one woman, that's already been stated, right?
Yes.
In Genesis chapter 2, that's the ideal.
Yes.
This is not dealing with ideal.
No, this is trying to shift
situations.
something that's in the wrong direction.
So
big
this
time.
is just recognizing, okay, that happens, right?
So how do we make that better?
I know it seems like, this seems hard on the daughter that's being sold as a servant, but this is a law that's actually protecting her in the context of the ancient world.
Yeah.
She is being protected under this law with protections that she didn't have elsewhere, right? So for a start, if he wasn't pleased with her, he has to let her be redeemed in some sense, right? He has to let her go free. He can't sell her because she's not to be traded like a piece of merchandise.
Yes.
Which again, this happens that concubines sometimes were treated as commodities and sold off. So no people trafficking here because he's broken faith with her. So he has to treat her as a wife. Now, if in the case, and this is, if he's buying, and again, this buying and selling here, we've just got to remember, this is not 18th century American slave market buying. Don't read that. Every marriage was transactional. Jacob
dowry was paid. Or
Jacob bought Rachel and Leah. In ancient terms, you would have bought them. Right?
Yes.
That's how it worked in the ancient world. This is the language, the kind of language that they're using. Okay, so we often, unfortunately, read into that buying and selling of more modern slave markets. So if she is in this transaction bought not for the man but for his son, then in verse 9, it says, if he selects her for his son, okay, as a wife or a concubine, if he buys her as a wife and concubine for his son, he must grant her the rights of a daughter. Okay. So she is to be treated as a wife with the rights of a wife if she's bought by the man himself. If it's as his son, she is to be treated as a daughter. Just to be emphatic here, so that, this is actually protecting her rights, that she doesn't become a slave concubine like in the other. In the other
and again,
nations.
for listeners, this isn't saying that that's a good practice. That's saying that this practice is happening. How do we protect people?
That's right. And how can we make it much better than it is?
Yeah.
Okay. And again, if you put this with a whole lot of other laws, I mean, again, realistically, women in this society were very vulnerable.
Yeah.
They had to be connected with a family. You don't just go wandering off independently and, get yourself a unit in the city and get a job. And I mean, which is this completely different context, right?
Well, and a polygamous culture as well, which we struggle to understand.
Yeah.
And the next law, I think, is going to speak into that. Verse 10, if he takes an additional wife, he must not reduce food, clothing, or marital rights of the first wife.
Yeah.
And if he does not do these things for her, she may leave free of charge without any exchange of money.
Okay, so again, it's going back to verse 7, the woman that's being sold as a wife and bought as a wife in the sense that we've described.
Yes.
She has to be treated not like an item that can be bought, and so she has to be treated as a human being with all the rights of a wife.
Yeah.
Right. So that's protecting situations like that.
Moving into verse 12.
Yeah, I think we could probably move through some of this
quicker,
a little quicker, Stu.
But I think it's good to set that understanding because we can now read the rest of these somewhat in the context of understanding what they're trying to do here.
And this first block is good because it's a classic example of how much of the background situation that we lack and how much also, Stu, with our cultural baggage, how much we read into this. When we read slave, we have a certain thing in mind that's not actually what's going on here.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not to say that wasn't that kind of slavery in the ancient world. There was.
Yes.
This is designed that not be the case in Israel.
And that was the kind of slavery that was the case in Egypt when they were there.
Yeah, that's right. So exactly.
That's what we're trying to shift here. All right, verse 12. Whoever strikes a person so that he dies must be put to death. But if he didn't intend any harm, and yet God caused it to happen by his hand, I will appoint a place for you where he may flee.
Yeah, saying God lets it happen means that it's like within the providence of God, if this happens and the person who is harmed, it's all about intent. You know? So the intent
so it's a bit
is
like
an important element
laws
here.
here today, for instance.
Yeah, that's right.
If I'm driving my car and, I'm not intentionally trying to kill someone, but by accident, something happens and they die, this is that. So it could be an ox that falls on them or who knows in this context.
Yeah. And so remember, you don't have jails, really.
No,
I mean, eventually you do, but not always.
Mm.
And so what happens is that the person who's committed manslaughter is protected because normally what would happen is that there normally would be some kind of retribution sought by the family, the avenger of blood, as they're called. And so that person is to be protected. So this is actually protecting someone
who's accidentally
killed someone. Right? The law is protecting
that person.
A person that's accidentally killed another person.
Yeah. However, if a person willfully, or some translations would say maliciously, acts against his neighbour to murder him by scheming, you must take him from my altar to be put to death.
Yeah. Now, there's going to be lots of putting to death throughout these laws. Again, it's a little bit abrasive for us.
Well, it's also feels a little contradictory to the commandment, thou shalt not kill. So.
Yeah. Again, it's just recognizing that certainly at this stage, there are no jails. Also, what is interesting about this is what isn't there. So you don't have prolonged forms of punishment and torture, no one's being impaled here, Stu.
Yes.
Or hung on crosses or, tortured for days on end. The ancient world is well known for these terrible, terrible prolonged forms of torture. You don't get any of this here. In fact, in the one case where it says if there's a case where a person is flogged, it has to be limited to this much, and someone has to be present to ensure that it's limited to that much. And again, I know we'll say, oh, what? But again, this is a massive step forward from what existed at the time. You can't just pull this and suddenly use our forms. That's just not going to be intelligible in the context of the ancient world. And this is keeping the order of society still. So there needs to be
deterrent.
There needs to be deterrent, and it has to be intelligible to the people as well.
Whoever strikes his father or his mother must be put to death. Whoever kidnaps a person must be put to death, whether he sells him or the person is found in his possession.
Yeah.
So in other words, you kidnap someone and then sell them, a bit like what happened with Joseph, let's just say, or whether you still got them, regardless if you're the one who's responsible for kidnapping them. Yep.
That's right. Yep.
Whoever curses his father or his mother must be put to death.
Yep. So this one, as well as the attacks their father and mother, is to be put to death. Interestingly, the treatment of mother and father is stricter here in the law of Moses than it is elsewhere.
Right.
Because, again, the sense in which it's so important to protect these relationships, because we're moving away from a caste society where there's inherent authority given because of your position. This is a much more family-oriented society. Remember, God is the father of his people, and they're, his people are his children. And so the protecting of these family relationships becomes paramount, important in this context.
Yeah. Verse 18, when men quarrel and one strikes the other with a stone or fist, and the injured man does not die but is confined to bed, if he can later get up and walk around outside, and some translations say leaning on his staff, then the one who struck him will be exempt from punishment. Nevertheless, he must pay for his lost work time and provide for his complete recovery.
Yep. So invariably, these are limiting punishments. It's ensuring that people aren't punished more than what's due for the situation. So the judge could take this and apply this to a whole lot of different cases where compensation for injury could well be brought out of anger, particularly if it's class-based, someone in a higher level class to someone in a lower level class. More likely, there would be disproportionate punishment for someone of a lower caste who injured someone of a higher caste. This is probably when the tortures and this is ensuring that the consequence is equivalent to the crime.
Yeah. Okay. Verse 20, when a man strikes his male or female slave with a rod and the slave dies under his abuse, the owner must be punished. However, if the slave can stand up after a day or two, the owner should not be punished because he is his property.
And the word there is money in the original. And what this is saying, so essentially it's protecting, and I'll explain why I point that out.
No, that's good.
So first of all, important thing to point out here, in the ancient world, your slave, you could do whatever you wanted with your slave. If you wanted to kill your slave, that's a completely legitimate thing to do, right? You had that kind of power over your slave. This is saying basically you don't have that, and slaves are protected by the law as much as anyone else. If, however, they recover, by saying that they're not to be punished, essentially this is saying that if you punish your slave and your slave is out of action for a period of time, then you've already lost that. Now remember, the slave, there's other laws that allow for the slave just to take off if they want.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
If it goes overboard. So you've got to put some of these laws together. So by saying here's his money, it means that, the lost labor is already
cost.
You're already incurring a cost on yourself because of the lost labor. Because again, this is recognizing that there might be instances where slaves do the wrong, and I think bond servants, perhaps we should call them, because again, the word slave, we keep thinking, we have a certain thing in our mind, but yes, they could be punished, but not disproportionately. And again, there are other laws that say that if a slave is punished so that they incur a certain injury, like a permanent injury, they go free. So if you punish your slave, like you blind him or something like that, that slave immediately goes free.
Yeah, we're going to come to that.
Yeah.
Verse 22, when men get in a fight and hit a pregnant woman so that her children are born prematurely, but there is no injury, the one who hit her must be fined as the woman's husband demands from him, and he must pay accordingly to judicial assessment.
And then it goes on, verse 23.
If there is an injury, then you must give life for life. Eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, bruise for bruise, wound for wound.
The eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand, that's a way of, stating kind of equal, making sure that punishment's always proportional. Yeah. It's not saying that literally someone would pluck out, your eye would get plucked out if you plucked out the eye. It's an idiom, right? It's a way of speaking. So it's a principle of proportionate punishment. So that's
someone stands on your foot, you don't have the right to kill them for that.
That's right.
Trying to keep it proportionate to the thing that's happened.
Yeah, the interesting thing here, this is also the protection of the pregnant woman and also potentially the child, the unborn child of the pregnant woman.
Yeah.
So the law is covering, and this is a situation that a judge might take this law and infer this to any kind of situation where some kind of negligence or anything like that would cause a pregnant woman or her child to be injured. The law protects them.
Okay, when a man strikes the eye of his male or female slave or servant and destroys it, he must let the slave go free in compensation for his eye.
Yeah.
If he knocks out the tooth of his male or female slave, he must let the slave go free in compensation for his tooth.
Think about that.
Yeah.
So
basically just don't strike
you strike your slave in anger and they lose a tooth and you've lost, they go free, right? That's not more than 6 years, remember? No. But if they're in their first year and you lose your temper and you strike your slave and you knock out their tooth, bang, they go free. You've lost
and the debt's
6
not
years
paid.
And the debt's not paid.
Yeah.
So that is, you don't get
really
stuff like this anywhere else.
It's really swinging the pendulum back the other way, isn't it?
Yeah.
Verse 28, when an ox gores a man or a woman to death, the ox must be stoned and its meat may not be eaten. But the ox's owner is innocent. So in other words, if an ox does it, the ox's owner isn't guilty of that. However, if the ox was in the habit of goring and its owner has been warned yet does not restrain it, and it kills a man or a woman, the ox must be stoned and its owner must also be put to death.
This is protection of life. This is this sense of the sacredness of life, so that even an animal that gores a person is seen to be a dangerous animal. And this could apply to any animal.
Yes.
Any kind of animal that you've got. A judge could infer from this.
It's actually your duty care. This is speaking to your person.
That's right. This is your duty
owner
care.
of the
So
ox.
if you're negligent and that ox is accustomed to doing that, then you are actually responsible. This is ensuring that life is protected, even that you are thinking ahead.
Yeah.
If there's any danger of this animal goring anyone, whether they be slave, free, man, woman, then they are to be protected. Yeah.
It goes on to say, if instead a ransom is demanded of him, he can pay a redemption price for his life in the full amount demanded from him. If it gores a son or a daughter, he is to be dealt with according to this same law. If the ox gores a male or a female slave, he must give 30 shekels of silver to the slave's master, and the ox must be stoned.
Yeah. So the important thing here with the male or female slave is that the ox is still to be put to death, right?
Yes.
So it's still
the cause.
So that's still a declaration of that kind of equality of the value of life.
And remembering an ox was a pretty essential.
Oh, absolutely. This is a very valuable animal. Very valuable animal.
Yes.
Okay. And so normally normally it's, they're just a slave. Come on, I'm not going to harm my animal for that. Now, with the fine here, see, typically a servant who's told to work with or around a bull didn't really have the same freedom of decision that someone else might have. And so the servant's master then has to have some share of responsibility for the servant's death.
Oh, and safety, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So in a sense, it means that the owner of the bull was not as guilty in such that because the slave's master had to share some guilt for that. Now, of course, a judge in this sort of case could certainly, if it was deemed that this previous law, the bull, if it was in the habit of goring people and gored the slave, they could still apply that. And in fact, implied in that previous law, because you can't just isolate laws.
No, that's right. Yeah.
So remember, the servant is still covered by that previous law, right? But there's this extra sense of responsibility on the master, right? If you just say, go and do that, and there's a dangerous bull there, then the master has to share some of the responsibility.
Of that.
So this is just adding this bit about servants because it recognised there are situations where someone might be harmed, but it's recognising that the responsibility is a little bit more widespread. You know what I mean?
Well, the next one goes on and says that as well. When a man uncovers a pit or digs a pit and does not cover it, and an ox or a donkey falls into it, the owner of the pit must give compensation. He must pay money to its owner, but the dead animal will become his. So it's saying you can't just go dig holes and leave them and not take responsibility for your duty of care to other animals in this case, but certainly people as well.
Yeah, that's right.
Verse 35, when a man's ox injures his neighbour's ox and it dies, they must sell the live ox and divide its proceeds. They must also divide the dead animal.
Yeah, which is, this is again is protection of property and shared responsibility.
If, however, it is known that the ox was in the habit of goring, yet its owner was not restrained it, he must compensate fully, ox for ox. The dead animal will become his. So again, it's talking about our duty of care. You've got to do what you can do to make sure you're protecting other people and other people's property. The minute you don't care about that, well, you're going to pay the price.
Yeah, exactly. And again, these are paradigms that are setting up principles for how to judge certain cases like this.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Let's move into chapter 22. Yep. Now we're talking about laws about theft. The first part there is really about the sanctity and sacredness of human life and looking after people in terms of personal safety and how we treat those in our household.
Yeah.
Now we're talking about laws of theft, 22 verse.
Property, and pretty much
property.
From the point of 21 verse 33, this is protecting the animals, which is part of the laws around property as well, in a sense. So we're sort of continuing that idea.
Great.
Yeah.
When a man steals an ox or a sheep and butchers it or sells it, he must repay 5 cattle for the ox or 4 sheep for the sheep.
Why a 5-fold payback for the ox, only 4-fold for a sheep?
Yeah.
Well, a possible reason probably relates to the nature of sheep. They're inveterate wanderers. They're going to stray where they shouldn't, right? So it's probably they're going to be a more constant temptation for a person to steal because they're just going to wander off all the time, and they're also easier to steal. I mean, an ox, you got to be pretty determined and pretty brazen, to steal an ox. But a sheep, the temptation is kind of greater. I find this an interesting law that it even recognizes that sort of degrees of intentionality, and degrees of perhaps temptation here
as well. Okay. If a thief is caught in the act of breaking in and he is beaten to death, no one is guilty of bloodshed. But if this happens after sunrise, there is guilt of bloodshed.
So this is protecting the thief.
Yeah.
This is a law protecting the thief.
Yes, of course. If it happens and no one else sees because it's dark.
If it happens at night, right, and because it's at night, you can't really see what you're doing. You're more likely, think about it at night.
Yeah.
You're more likely to strike a fatal blow. You've just woken up, you're alarmed, all of this sort of stuff. But it's different after sunrise. And why would it be different after sunrise? Because you've got your wits about you. You're more aware of what you're doing. The sense here is so that would be how this was understood.
Right.
In other words, if someone is coming to steal from you, you don't have the right to play their judge and kill them for stealing from you. That's disproportionate. So this is protecting a thief.
Yeah.
Now, there are laws governing what happens to thieves in terms of stealing property. This law is protecting his life.
Because I wondered also whether that was to do with the fact that there wouldn't have been a witness if it's dark and night it's difficult to kind of, who's going to judge what was happening
so in
here.
a sense, this does protect the defender of the household, because it's like that's more likely that the blow's going to be fatal at night, right? But if it's during the day,
then
you have no right to kill the thief.
Yeah, there's other ways of recourse or dealing with it. A thief must make full restitution. If he is unable, he is to be sold because of his theft. In other words, he's to be sold to pay back the debt.
So we're still, someone in the ancient world would say, what?
Yeah.
I can't inflict, my own retribution on a thief for breaking into my house, even to the point of death, which would have been quite common. No, you can't, but there's still laws that govern theft as well, and this is it. Yeah.
And so the thief has to pay for what he's taken or return it to you, I guess, and if he can't do that, then to pay for it, he needs to become a bond servant.
That's right.
Exactly.
So if he goes off and sells it and what's stolen can't be recovered, and again, this is the common way of paying debts. You sell the last thing you have, which is your labor. But he's also, even this thief, still has the right of the 6 years, and it can't be more than 6 years.
Yeah.
This is an interesting one, because he could steal, let's say he comes in and steals gold that's worth 20 years of labor.
Yeah.
The thief can only serve 6 years.
Yeah. And the last verse in that, verse 4, if what was stolen, whether an ox, donkey, or a sheep, is actually found alive in his possession, he must repay double. So what it's saying is you can't just give him back and go, oh, sorry about that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
No, there actually needs to be a consequence for the fact that you tried to steal it in the first place.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
All right, laws about crop protection. When a man lets a field or vineyard be grazed in and then allows his animals to go and graze in someone else's field, he must repay with the best of his own field or vineyard.
Yeah, that's right. So if your cow goes and wrecks someone's vines, you've got to pay. So protection of property.
When a fire gets out of control, spreads to thorn bushes and consumes stacks of cut grain, standing grain, or a field, the one who started the fire must make full restitution for what was burned.
Absolutely.
Yep. Laws about the personal property. Verse 7. When a man gives his neighbour money or goods to keep, but they are stolen from that person's house. So when we say goods to keep, it means to look after, essentially. Not to keep as in, hey, that's yours, but to look after. But they are stolen from that person's house. The thief, if caught, must repay double, which is kind of the same as what we read above. If the thief is not caught, the owner of the house must present himself to the judges to determine whether or not he has taken his neighbour's property. In any case of wrongdoing involving an ox, a donkey, a sheep, a garment, or anything else lost, and someone claims, that's mine, the case between the two parties is to come before the judges. The one the judges condemn must repay double to his neighbour.
Yeah, so the before God probably means that the disputants come to the sanctuary where claims and oath are made in the presence of God. Like there's some cases here where it's one person's word against another. It's like, did this really get stolen from you, or did you...
Have you just hidden it somewhere?
Have you just hidden it somewhere because you wanted to keep it? How do you determine that? Well, you go into the sanctuary and you make an oath before Yahweh. Now, in our culture, we think, oh, that's fine. All right, I'll go and make the oath and I'll keep it.
Yeah.
But in this culture, that was a big thing to do for them, and it was very unlikely that someone would lie on oath. I mean...
But it's interesting that even today,
not unknown.
Put your hand on the Bible.
That's right.
And swear that you're going to tell the truth. We're still doing that.
We're still doing it. That's right.
There we go. When a man gives his neighbour a donkey, an ox, a sheep, or any other animal to care for, but it dies, is injured, or is stolen, while no one is watching, there must be an oath before the Lord between the two of them to determine whether or not he has taken his neighbour's property.
Yeah, that'll be on oath. Yeah.
Correct. Its owner must accept the oath, and the other man does not have to make restitution.
Yeah, so you have to take him at his word. If he swears, he makes an oath to God that this is the case, you have to accept that. Yeah.
And remember, in this culture, of course, it was very much focused on God or the gods, so he didn't want to upset God, Yahweh, or the gods, perceived gods, whatever they were anyway. But if in fact the animal was stolen from his custody, he must make a restitution to its owner. If it was actually torn apart by a wild animal, he has to bring it as evidence, and then he does not have to make restitution for the torn carcass. Yep.
Yeah. And so this is, again, it's this, demand for evidence. And I mean, these are important ideas being laid down here.
In some ways, I think it's also lowering the value of property against people.
Yeah.
It's constantly saying, guys, it doesn't matter.
That's right.
Our relationships are way more important than arguing over a torn apart goat.
Yeah,
big
picture, that's exactly what's going on. Yeah.
Verse 14, when a man borrows an animal from his neighbour and it is injured or dies while its owner is not there with it, the man must make full restitution.
Yeah, you've got to look after other people's stuff.
Property, yeah. If its owner is there with it, the man does not have to make restitution. If it was rented, the loss is covered by its rental price. Yeah. All right. Moving into verse 16.
Yeah. Now
chapter
these
22.
get interesting.
Yes, they do. When a man seduces a virgin who was not promised in marriage and he has sexual relations with her, he must certainly pay the bridal price for her to be his wife. If her father absolutely refuses to give her to him, he must pay an amount in silver equal to the bridal price for virgins.
This is protecting the women, right?
Yeah.
They can't be taken advantage of. Now,
Yes.
this is, again, it's a culture where sexual intercourse is regarded as basically the seal of marriage. So
Right.
you are married once that happens, right? And therefore, again, this is a culture where there's certain transactions that take place. So this is protecting the right of the woman to marriage, because in that culture, again, once she has slept with a man, she is seen as being married to that man, and she's going to be ineligible for
Yes.
marriage, right? And
Yes.
that's a big deal in this culture. And it's also protecting the right of the family to essentially the bride price. Again,
Yes.
completely different. We don't have these sorts of things, but this is ensuring that that justice is done by everyone according to the customs of the ancient
the
world.
time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
according to the customs of the time.
Yeah.
So it's not saying that the woman doesn't have a choice here. The one who negotiates this is the father of the bride. So either he's got to pay the bride price and marry the woman if that happens,
Or he's got to pay the bride price anyway.
And if the father says no,
no.
she's not marrying you, you've got to pay it anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So either way, you're going to pay.
Because essentially what a bride price was
It's a
the
support.
security, it was
Financial
the support
support.
for the woman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's how she was going to live.
Yeah.
All right, moving on. Chapter 22, verse 18, capital offences. You must not allow a sorceress to live.
And go down to verse 20. These
All right?
all sit.
Whoever has sexual intercourse with an animal must be put to death.
Yeah.
And whoever sacrifices to any gods except the Lord alone is to be set apart for destruction.
Yeah. So this little cluster, because you think, man, why would you need to have a law about that? This little cluster of laws relates to ancient Near Eastern cultic practices, right? And this is very, very serious. Like this occult stuff, if you get involved in this, there's not much that's worse than that. So the sorcery, the sexual relations with an animal, because it's like
Bestiality
the golden
was a big
calf, or
thing, totally.
these animals. This was the case in ancient Egypt, where animals had this kind of cultic significance. So that's what's going on there.
Laws protecting the vulnerable. Verse 21, you must not exploit a foreign resident or oppress him, since you were foreigners in the land of Egypt.
Okay, so just think about that. Now, this is what I was saying before. Foreigners are going to come in amongst them. I mean, they're going to come in amongst them because they're going to work out that you can find asylum essentially in this country that treats slaves well, that has these laws that where you can't hand
Treat them
slaves
badly,
back. So foreigners are probably more likely to be people who maybe have fallen into debt, have fallen into slavery, for whatever reason have been exiled from their country. Because I know foreigner for us, we have a lot of, people are transferring from country to country, migrating. We're a very migrating population in terms of individuals. But in these times, you didn't leave your country or your tribe or clan unless something really serious had happened. This is protecting these people.
But remember, also coming out of Egypt, there were some foreigners that came with them, because remember they provided for those foreigners in the covenant, under certain parameters. So there were already foreigners among them potentially.
There were,
and
there always were. Uriah the Hittite, for example, who's in the story of David and Bathsheba is a man that's given great honor in the text. The guy's a foreigner. I mean, so we got to just keep remembering that there was always provision for foreigners who came in, and that they could link themselves with God's people, be circumcised, and they were part of God's people, protected by all of these laws. Yeah.
Amazing.
So this is not just a ethnic, you didn't have to have this ethnic connection. There lots of foreigners attached themselves.
Yes, this is how we treat people.
To ancient Israel. That's right.
Basically. Verse 22, you must not mistreat any widow or fatherless child. If you do mistreat them, they will no doubt cry to me, and I will certainly hear their cry. My anger will burn, and I will kill you with the sword. Then your wives will be widows, and your children fatherless.
This is a strong statement.
It is. Yeah.
And it's interesting that both of these statements come with just a bit of extra fire, right? A bit of extra zeal in these, right? Do not mistreat or oppress a foreigner, for you were foreigners in Egypt, right? Again, there's that extra bit of explanation here as well.
Yeah.
This is basically the poor. So this is the fatherless and the widow. This is basically a cover-all for for those at the bottom of society. Now, these are protected. The strongest statements of protection of individuals in the law of Moses come for those people, right?
For the people that would have been at the bottom of the caste.
Absolute bottom. Yeah, that's right. I mean, all sorts of laws are providing for them and making sure that, they have opportunities to be protected and to flourish and so forth. So, and the extra bit that's given here, if you oppress them, take advantage, in my translation, in any way, even just take advantage of them, right? And they cry out to me, I will certainly hear their cry. He's basically saying, I have a special heart for the poor. I have a special heart for the disadvantaged. And if they cry out to me, my anger will be aroused and I will kill you with the sword, your wives and your children, and you will become fatherless. This is a very strong statement.
And it reflects back to when they were in Egypt and they were crying out, and I heard them, my people
It's the same term.
Me.
Yeah. Like I hear the cry. I am a God, he's saying, who hears the cries of the oppressed.
Yeah.
Right. So you make sure that you don't treat the oppressed like you were treated.
If you lend money to my people, to the poor person among you, you must not be like a money lender to him. You must not charge him interest.
Wow. How's that? This is usury, right?
Yeah.
No usury, no interest payments. I mean, this is pretty radical stuff. Because again, in the context of the ancient world, this was one of the ways in which the poor were kept poor. This was one of the ways that people ended up actually having to sell themselves into slavery because of people taking advantage of their need to lend them money with exorbitant interest. And this is not to happen at all.
This one's a little confusing. Verse 26, if you ever take your neighbour's cloak as collateral, return it to him before sunset, for it is his only covering, it is the clothing for his body. What will he sleep in? And if he cries out to me, I will listen because I am compassionate.
There are moments of beauty in the law of Moses, and this is one of the moments of beauty, right? If you take your neighbour's cloak as a pledge, which they would often, this is probably a poor person who can't give money, so he gives his cloak. Return it by the end of the day, because otherwise, during the night, he'll get cold.
Yeah.
And I care about that, says God.
Yeah.
He said, I care about the fact that this person will lie there shivering. This is an emotive comment. What else will they sleep in, right?
Yeah.
When they cry out to me, I will hear. So this is referring back to the previous one, for I am compassionate. Now, you might be able to justify that. Yes, but he owes me money.
Yeah.
I don't care. He shall never lie there shivering at night.
Yeah. And in some ways, I wonder whether it's saying, just don't ever take the clothes off someone's back as collateral.
Yeah.
In a way. It's like,
that's right.
Because you're going to have to give it back before the end of the day anyway. So just don't take it.
Yeah,
it's like,
that's right.
the guy needs something to sleep in.
Yeah.
It's like, let's
that's right.
leave that be.
Yeah.
All right. Respect for God. Verse 28. You must not blaspheme God or curse a leader among your people.
Yeah, it's interesting that there's this correspondence between God
and
the leader. Both are authority figures and they have to be respected and obeyed. I mean, we see later on in the story of Moses, of course, that the people's rebellion against Moses was seen as effectively as a rebellion against God. So this is, in some sense, preempting that sort of thing, because within Israel, leaders were seen as divinely appointed. And so to disrespect them is to disrespect God.
I mean, because they were his representatives. Exactly.
In fact, it's interesting. Paul even picks up on this law in Romans 13, and Peter does as well, when they both talk about respecting authorities.
Yeah. What's interesting, this translation, mine suggests that it could either be you must not blaspheme God or you must not blaspheme the judges.
Yeah, that's right.
Interchangeable there. You must not hold back offerings from your harvest or your vats. Give me the firstborn of your sons. Do the same with your cattle and your flock. Let them stay with their mothers for 7 days, but on the 8th day you are to give them to me.
Yeah, so they're to be dedicated to God, essentially. Yeah. So this is the, giving of the first fruits to God. So God gets the first. I mean, a lot of these laws depend on a lifestyle in which you have ultimate regard for God.
Yeah.
You're going to keep these laws because you have ultimate regard for God.
Yeah. And also remember, in the culture at the time, the eldest had major significance in the ongoing cultural setting for the family. Yeah. So having the firstborn dedicated to God, really gave the best chance for the witness of God to continue in that family, that family line. Verse 31, be my holy people. You must not eat the meat of a mauled animal found in the field. Throw it to the dogs.
So laws of physical cleanliness, and we're going to come to these in Leviticus. This is identified with spiritual purity. So it's a way of them sensitizing themselves. Physical purity and what you eat is associated with spiritual purity. That connection is designed to, look, it's going to protect them from
Disease, sickness,
from sickness for a start. It's also about sort of symbolizing their spiritual purity.
Let's move into chapter 23, laws about honesty and justice. Verse 1, you must not spread a false report. Do not join the wicked to be a malicious witness.
Which happened all the time in the ancient world. And we have plenty of, the story of Ahab stealing Naboth's vineyard, right? And he sets up false witnesses in a court so that Naboth can be convicted. And so we have a number of examples of how this, was a fairly common sort of practice, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And this is going to be a repeated theme, actually, in the laws of Moses.
You must not follow a crowd in wrongdoing. Do not testify in a lawsuit and go along with a crowd to pervert justice. Do not show favoritism to a poor person in his lawsuit. So a few things there.
Yeah, well, first of all, it's essentially the same as that first law. Like when there's a whole lot of people saying, come on, we need to get rid of this
person.
You can't make your decision on that basis. But it's interesting, it even says don't show favoritism to a poor person. So God's concern for the poor can't be taken that they
usurp justice.
That they are somehow, immune from justice.
Yeah. If you come across your enemy's stray ox or donkey, you must return it to him. If you see the donkey of someone who hates you lying helpless under its load, and you want to refrain from helping it, you must help with it.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
That it addresses that. It specifically addresses situations where people are enemies and you need to treat your enemy as a brother. Essentially, this is happening. You need to, this is what this is saying. Yeah. You need to treat your enemy as a brother.
That's great. You must not deny justice to the poor among you in his lawsuit. Stay far away from a false accusation and do not kill the innocent and the just, because I will not justify the guilty.
Yeah.
Goes on to say, you must not take a bribe, for a bribe blinds the clear-sighted and corrupts the words of the righteous. You must not oppress a foreign resident. You yourselves know how it feels to be a foreigner, because you were foreigners in the land of Egypt.
All of these laws, it's interesting. You get these shifts in the law, and this is real. A lot of these are about attitudes towards certain people. So, the attitude, your attitude towards your enemy, you find something of his and I'm going to get back at him here, or your attitude towards the poor in lawsuits. Well, if it's a poor person against a rich person and I'm judging, as a judge, if I'm judging a case, I want to be in with these are small, very, small world societies, right? So to make a decision against a rich person, that could come back at you. This is saying don't do that. The bribe thing could be in a lot of different forms. Someone buys you some present, particularly a rich person, buys you lots of gifts as the judge, or even beforehand, does a bit of a Godfather trick and buys you lots of gifts and then you owe him a favor.
Yes.
There's to be none of that sort of thing happening. And then finishing with the foreigner. Again, we come back to the foreigner. This protection of these people. You can't oppress them. You've got to look after them.
Powerful stuff. All right, now we move into Sabbaths and festivals.
Yeah, and I think we can say something generally about this, Stu. The Sabbath laws were vital because this is essentially setting up a rhythm of life that's going to instill something into this people. You work 6 days and you rest, and everyone gets to rest. And so this is that part of this equalizing thing, right?
Yeah.
This is actually part of your identity as the people of God. Your life revolves not around labor like it did in Egypt, but around the worship of God.
Worship
so
and gratitude,
stopping on the Sabbath day was an expression of worship to God, as well as the need for physical recuperation and connecting with people. And so this is not something, Sabbath laws are unique. One of the things that are unique to ancient Israel. People elsewhere in the ancient world just worked and worked and worked. And of course, you went to the shrines maybe in the morning or the evening or whatever, but you worked and worked and worked, and life revolved around work. This is a society where God wants the lives of these people to revolve around worship and rest ultimately, because it's a symbol that he's calling them into a life of rest. And rest applies to the poor, right? The poor amongst you, even the animals are protected by these Sabbath laws. So, and as well as the crops. So it starts off for 6 years you are to sow your fields and harvest the crops, but during the 7th year, let the land lie unplowed and unused. then the poor can get food from it because the crops, things will still grow.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's.
But you weren't counting it as part of your production.
You're not counting it. So this is, and by the way, this would rotate. Now we now know, Stu, that resting a field is actually necessary
we do it now.
For the field to recover its minerals and nutrients and everything like that. So actually, this is going to be good for the fields, right? This is to prevent them farming their land until the land becomes desert. Now, if you look, for example, in what was known as the Fertile Crescent of ancient Mesopotamia, today, Stu, it's desert. Why is it desert? Because it was over-farmed. It was over-farmed, so they destroyed the environment. So this is going to protect the environment, number one. It's going to protect the poor, and there is provision here for wild animals, right?
Yeah, exactly.
This is a law that ensure that the farming still allows something for the wild animals. Why is the law concerned about that? Because God created all these creatures and he created them according to their kinds.
They have a role
diversity,
to play.
they have a role to play, right? It's protecting the creatures that God has created. This is these laws are unique, as I said, to Israel, and they're absolutely remarkable for the protection even of wild animals. So, and then it goes on to say about resting on the seventh day, and that applies to your ox, your donkey, the slave that born in your household, the foreigner living among you. Everyone gets to rest. It has an equalizing application. And then the festivals are again setting up this rhythm of life that orients around worship, right? So there are these regular festivals that are constantly drawing the people into remembering what God has done for them. So it's setting up a new rhythm or order of life that's not ordered around production and labor, but it's ordered around worship. So you've got the Festival of Unleavened Bread, which is the Passover festival. We've talked about that earlier on. You've got the
Festival of Harvest.
That's right. You've got the Festival of Harvest, which is Pentecost. You are celebrating that as a gift from God. You're reminding yourself that everything that you have is a gift of God, and similar to the Feast of Ingathering. But this is also the Feast of Tabernacles that celebrates the time when God led them and provided for them
in the desert,
in the wilderness.
Yeah. That's fantastic.
So these are about remembering. So these 3 times a year, it actually says all the men are to appear before the sovereign Lord, which is often what would happen is the whole families would go. We know that from but at the very least, if the families can't, and there were plenty of situations in which the families couldn't, the men as representatives of the family had to at least come and appear before the Lord. So,
Matt, I think we probably need to wrap up there. We're running a little out of time. It's been actually great because, again, as I said at the start of this episode, in the past, as I've read through this, I've tended to skip through it and kind of go, this seems like laws that relate back then, but it's been great to sort of unpack things, why this is so important in the culture of its time, so countercultural in terms of other laws around, but how it impacted setting up these people and really trying to swing a pendulum back, as you say, from a man-made order to what God knew was best for us in his order.
Yeah, and look, I know that that's a lot, and well done for making it this far, because there's a lot of detail there. But I feel it's really important to see what I'm going to call the beauty of this, actually. It's a rough situation in an ancient world context. I mean, we're very fortunate because we live in a very ordered society, and which is governed by laws that, to be honest, are actually derived from these principles.
Well, the fact that we do is because of this.
It's because of this, right? All of our legal systems are based on the principles, the same principles that these are based on. But in the context of the ancient world, I just can't say enough, Stu, how revolutionary these laws were, and that is actually the point. They were to live the kind of lives, they were to stand out from all other parts of the ancient Near East. They were to be unique, and their uniqueness was to declare who God is, and then in the light of that, who we are in relation to God. Every part of their lives would declare those two things, who God is and who we are. I think that is a beautiful thought to finish on. We are called not to order our lives by the way that our society orders things, but our priorities, our values are ultimately to reflect who God is and who we are as sacred children of God.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Thrive Deeper. Our home on the internet is thrivetoday.tv. You can contact us, ask questions, see all our resources and much more at our website thrivetoday.tv. We really appreciate the questions and thoughts about what you're reading as we go through the Bible with Thrive. Until next time, our prayer is that these shows will inspire you to go deeper and thrive.